Welcome back to Burning Questions. It's a podcast from 500 Degrees. 500 Degrees is a digital content studio. We have offices in Toronto, Miami, Columbus, Ohio. We've got great clients in the QSR space, some of the best in the country, around the world, really. Burger King, Tim Hortons, Popeyes, and now Firehouse Subs. We also work in the convenience store industry, the automotive industry, basically anybody that's a multi-unit retailer. If you want to find out more about us, go to weare500degrees.com or click the link or the QR code. But one of the joys of my job is the people that I meet, the associates, the vendors, and our clients. And one of those people, persons, individuals, is Chris Hall. Welcome, Chris Hall. I'll do a little background on you, but we've known each other for a number of years. You have a storied past. Before going to your current company, you worked as the managing partner or co-CEO of Sapient Nitro. So that must have been just a wig tear of a incredible buildup and technology play, but also worked as BBDO's president and CEO in the Southern region, J. Walter Thompson, big career. And now you're at a company called AIQ. And as you can tell, audience members, that this probably has something to do with AI. So Chris, give us an idea of what your website is, where we can find you, and what you guys do.
So Matt, thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be with you as always. AIQ, we enable and empower the potential of human capital through the power of AI. So we integrate human intelligence, HI, with artificial intelligence, AI, to increase productivity, to increase employee and customer satisfaction, to create cool products and ways of working. Basically, for our clients, we create a strategic advantage through the harnessing and leveraging of HI and AI.
When there's a nascent field like AI, we're always faced with the initial, this is what we do, but then how do we do it? And I know that you guys have some experience in building some of these models out. But let's start, first of all, with some of the issues associated with, is this going to replace all of my jobs? So particularly in the marketing services world, we've heard for years in the past, Michael Ovitz from CAA was going to eliminate all jobs in advertising because he controls the creative. Sergey Brin from Google said he was going to eliminate the middleman. And now it's kind of like AI is the next threat. And I think all of us think in terms of, what does that mean for me? Am I going to have a job? But it's also like, what can it do to help make my job easier? When you talk about human capital meeting technology capital, to take us through some of the early first-in wins that you see with some of the companies right now.
Yeah, I think because it's interesting. Let's start with the product adoption, if you will, the AI tools and creative tools that use AI. I in my career haven't seen product adoption speed, the speed of which is happening, right now. It took ChatGPT, just a few months to get well over 1 million users, and that usually takes years. Yeah. So the starting point is individuals. People have been experimenting with Gen AI. Many of them have really increased their expertise so that their knowledge is now producing really usable content. And a few of them have even increased productivity, kind of the stages you might expect in adoption. From a company standpoint, to me, it's been mainly the large companies. Publicis has a large LLM and AI platform for its employees and clients. WPP with Open. Edelman just introduced not long ago Archie. So these large pieces of holding companies and things like that are creating these playgrounds for clients and employees to make things, to experiment, to see results faster, sales results. Different and individual pieces of the marketing communications chain, if you will. So I'm seeing a lot of individual progress, people making progress. I'm seeing companies make progress on individual pieces. Where I think the next place we have to go is actually working AI and automation into the workflow and process of a company. Not seeing a lot of that. I'm not seeing operational people using AI and IA, which is intelligent automation, to move things through the process faster, to increase the quality and the efficiency at the same time. And so all the individual stuff that's been going on is fine, and it's making inroads. But think of it this way: as if I was driving a Corolla that went 0 to 60 in about 5 minutes, and I just bought a Ferrari that's 0 to 60 in a few seconds, right now I'm not actually getting anywhere faster because I'm still going to hit the stoplights.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still going to bump into stuff, so that it doesn't matter that I've got a high-speed Ferrari AI thing going on with an individual if the process isn't built to accept the increased speed of 0 to 60. So
Sure.
the car's not getting anywhere faster than it used to. And so I think the workflow and process needs to start to catch up to the individuals.
And I'm sure you saw that at Sapient, where, and some of the technologies that you guys were involved with, you probably were, a leader in the DSP space and programmatic and optimization of advertising. Earlier than that, it was probably the creation of websites and apps and other technology tools that customers and process people can use. Um, would you say that the paradigm still exists, that you may have something at the top? This may be just illustrating your Ferrari and Corolla principle a little deeper, but you've got the concept of what we're doing, you've got the product of what we're doing, but trying to push it down into the day-to-day people who are either phobic about new technology or using it, or just they don't have the training that should be provided by the corporation. Where's that disconnect coming up? And have you seen that at the holding companies yet?
I've seen more at the holding company level of it, actually putting the brakes on from the top down, not the bottom up. I see, I think agency people in particular they're very curious beasts. So they're going to be playing with things, and you think about, when we were growing up and how they tinker with Photoshop, and
Right.
It's not much different from that.
What is Photoshop? I don't even know what that is.
But I've seen emails from holding companies that say absolutely no one use AI to do any client work. We're not ready, and
Right.
so you've got risk is the barrier at the top of the companies because they don't want anything to go wrong, whether it be copyright or plagiarism or bias or any of those kind of trip ups. And from the bottom, you've got that fear that you mentioned a minute ago: is this going to take my job? And so the two barriers are fear, kind of at the bottom of the pyramid, and risk at the top. And both are starting to be mitigated in terms of how the tools themselves are approaching it, but also how the companies are thinking through the benefits for clients and the benefits for the employees. Because quite frankly, if employees don't get on the AI bus, they're going to be woefully ill-equipped to compete for jobs in the future. So I think it's pretty important to get those folks. They've got creative minds. They've got to get with the tools that can help them use those minds in order to create great work and happy clients.
Yeah, I can see super early adopters in some of our companies, the most aggressive creative people that are always looking for, what can I do to get there faster, but still have quality of work, and would engage with ChatGPT or Imager or any of the image creation or storyboard creation to really bring to life. I mean, we've had creative people that bring in a first concept situation a semi-animated storyboard, and it really brings this to life. However, we have to caution ourselves on what was the input that you gave the machine. Was it proprietary, to your point on legal issues in AI? Were you putting anything into an open source platform that is now open source, but it was an IP of a client or ourselves?
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Storyboard creation, concept image generation, even note taking and call reports.
Yes.
a big believer in Fathom. We've used Fathom. I'm a big
Hmm.
believer in the new AI assistant that's in the upper right hand corner on all PDFs and the Adobe platform.
Hmm.
So it's coming fast, and I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
The A counterpoint to getting there faster, but also using IP of the client or IP of the agency into an open source platform. How do you start to build a walled garden, almost like your own protected little AI world that doesn't let anything out to open source, but still allows you to take advantage of the speed and the processing of AI? Is that even around? Like we talked about LLMs, smart dams. What do we need to do in order to create our own bricks around
Yeah.
AI?
Yeah. The platforms that I just mentioned for Publicis, Omnicom, and Edelman are all private LLMs, which means they aren't open source, and they are training it and feeding it its data and keeping all the client data, secure. That's an expensive endeavor. So when you're a medium-sized agency, you have to think about some different things. You have to get some tools. There are AI tools now, that are, centurions, if you will, to make sure things aren't going in. I've seen some good work being done with APIs, so that you can access and have an inflow of the information, but you protect what goes
Hmm.
to the outside. So there are some things being done, particularly in distributed models with edge computing, so it never gets to the cloud. There's enough processing power in kind of the local screen or the local area to apply the AI without feeding the data and feeding it back into the cloud. So
Hmm.
there are several kind of things going on in terms of the workarounds. I think that the people are finding that building the private LLMs, which gives you the brick walls, walled garden you're talking about, takes time and money.
Hmm.
You might have clients like you mentioned your clients for a second ago. Though they may be large enough to start thinking about building a private LLM and give you access to it.
Hmm.
So there are going to be different ways to slice that, but it's the open AI people, and the people using open AI, that's at the top of their list, and there are lots of people thinking about how to address those concerns.
With the cloud, the model of the cloud is you can have your data protected in the cloud. It's almost like a leased option without having your own cloud. Same thing with an LLM. Do
Hmm.
you think there's or have you seen anything that's in development right now in terms of a gigantic LLM you can plug into it and have your own walled off garden, so to speak, without having to build your own? I mean, are we starting to see that in the development cycle
Yeah,
of AI?
absolutely. There will be, LLMs where you're leasing space and they're private. Yes, some other people. Yes, 100%. And I think there's still some security things to work out on those, but they're doable. There's no reason why that shouldn't be done. And it will likely be, kind of on a SaaS basis, if you will, and
Hmm.
you'll get the price will be based around how much you're using,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that kind of thing.
So in the marketing services world, advertising agency world, you're going to have the small boutique specialty shops. You'll have what I call the middleware, those that are, we find insights and we drive it into an integrated marketing strategy, and we do media and planning, sort of a generalist agency. And then
Hmm.
you've got the large shops. So we see what the large groups are doing. But as you guys at AIQ go out and talk with potential clients or current clients, how do you get somebody started in, let's say, a small specialty shop or a middleware advertising agency? There might not be any difference between the two, but if you walked in day one, what's your elevator pitch to get these guys started? Besides, the robots are going to come and kill you.
uh, well, I think it doesn't take that long because the management of those firms are dealing with the problem of competitors that are putting it to work and they're falling behind, employees that are being frustrated because they're doing too much mundane, routine, repeatable tasks that AI should be doing, so they're quitting. And they or doing their side hustles at home.
Right.
Those kind of things. So, from a productivity and creativity standpoint, I think it's intuitive that they need to look into it. What I think is the problem for a middleware shop, if you will, is they do think about AI as a job replacement activity, that we're going to eliminate those jobs. And that's the wrong way to think about it. I counsel our clients on think about not occupations and jobs, but tasks. And what tasks are being done at your agency that would be better served by AI, so that your HI can be working on value added client relationship strategic issues, and you have a happier employee, happier client, and you're getting collective intelligence. You're using people and machines to be moving things around. So quit thinking about jobs and think about tasks.
Sure.
And then how do you want to divide those tasks between the roles that you want the HI to play and the roles of the AI?
When we look at the question of tasks, and there are certain tasks in an organization, particularly advertising agencies, design firms, that everybody takes pride in. So, for example, we need a new logo and a tagline. And if you Google logo maker AI, you'll find 30 to 40 of these .coms that are experimenting. Some are good, some are bad. But when you lock in on the fact that I can put a modicum of information in terms of the images, the words I want to use, the kind of look, the kind of lockup, there's probably 7 or 8 filters I can use on just creating a logo, and have a dozen representatives that I can send to a client after I pull them off, adopt, put a deck together. I think that's one of the fears that people have, is like, oh, this is going to take my job away. But is logo design and development something that we want to hang our hat on, or is it the entire integrated package and we just get the logo and identity out of the way?
Mm-hmm.
So culturally, do you see, or would you anticipate having to break some of those barriers down inside these companies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think that um, the impact that let's see your logo example for a moment. There's still the human element of who's deciding which ones go to the client, what needs tweaking. If this color is really right for the audience that we're going after and the brand we're representing, there are still lots of things that you need to add or subtract from the options that you get, besides just giving some options. And I think that there is value add to that. But I also think that, and I think the package is a way to approach it, and I think also the business model is another way to think about it. I don't think the agency world is going to be in the FTE business.
Mm.
I think it's going to be in the outcome business.
Mm-hmm.
And what is that outcome worth? And what is I think it's going to change in terms of how you think about it, because already procurement officers are putting in RFPs. How are you using AI to cut the hours that you bill to us?
Mm-hmm.
And in that arena, agencies need a differentiated positioning and operations model in order to change that conversation and get out of that, the meat market business, because it's not going to be a profitable way of going about working.
Yep. It's insight and packaging. And I know in the early stages, the ad agency world, we're always our worst enemy, because if we want to go into a presentation and say, we're using AI, that first question, as you had mentioned, usually back is like, well, so you're not going to charge us as much? Oops, we fell into that trap.
Yeah.
It was interesting. We had 2 of the top legal thinkers in the advertising world on our podcast the other day,
Hmm.
from Davis and Gilbert, Ina Shore and Ashima Dial. One represents, prosecution and trial and defense, and the other is about policy and actual law. In terms of, and Ashima talked about, all right, let's say you use this logo maker. We got to trademark. We got to search it. We got to make sure there's nothing else that kind of looks like it. You
Hmm.
can't just accept a line that comes out of AI. But she says
Hmm.
that the time may come where the AI cloud will be able to pick up that information, mind will pick up and automatically do a trademark search on what the AI machine is generated. In fact, they probably won't even in the future, perhaps 18 months, 2 years from now, not even give you an option that is not cleared or
Hmm.
potentially cleared from a trademark. Found that
Hmm.
incredibly fascinating.
Hmm.
But on the compliance side, will you guys help write compliance sort of themes or boilerplate inside contracts now that the big companies are going to either have to defend against or ask these agencies to work with? Is that something on your plate?
No, we won't be doing. What we will be doing is suggesting what the best AI solution is for your given industry, your given problem, where to, how to your given set of technology, et cetera, et cetera. And then we will be also able to say, here are the watchouts.
Mm-hmm.
Here are the places where we think this could be problems, and some suggestions on how to mitigate them. But the actual language, that's not going to be. I don't see that as part of our service, because we're going to be help building the solution.
Our insurance providers are looking at it right now, our liability insurance groups,
Hmm.
and they're kind of like, just get more insurance right now. It's
Yeah.
just like protect yourself for a 10x,
Hmm.
but they have no idea what's coming. It'll be interesting to see what's coming in the future. Tell us about what you're doing in higher ed. I know you're doing, there's no real courses on AI, but you're kind of taking a breather course on AI. Is it with Northwestern? I can't remember the
MIT.
MIT.
Yes.
Who are the thinkers behind it in terms of like because usually in classes like that, they bring in just a blistering top shelf group of instructors and paid folks to help move the ball.
Yeah, it was basically the very top echelon of the MIT faculty, um, and they did some interviews with some other associated people. But the very tip top of their robotics
Mm.
team, the very tip top of their ethics team, in terms of the some of the issues dealing with AI. Um, People that specialized in natural language processing and understanding, so to really get into the nitty gritty of the potential of what those technologies are, and have, and where they're going. So it was a great group of faculty, and yeah, they were very interesting in terms of they had the theoretical learning in the classroom, and then they asked you to bring a real life kind of business situation or company, and then there were assignments for each module, and you had to apply that learning and thinking to that real life situation. So it was rigorous, but really interesting in terms of thinking about um, the application of it. The course was about how to apply and the impact that AI has on business strategy.
Mm.
And that's one of the one of the things that I'm interested in doing what I'm doing is I don't think enough companies are creating a strategic advantage with AI. It's so far been an individual trying to improve some performance, or a large company playing defense and not being one to be left behind, as opposed to game changing kind of ideas of how can we really make something new and different that separates us from our competition. So I was really interested. I'm never going to be or profess to be the expert in the technology or the tools, but in terms of how to integrate it into an effective strategy to create advantage, I think that's a really interesting place to play, and it starts to then bring value to it.
Any mind blowing, head slapping trends or predictions that you've heard these guys at MIT talk about that are beyond the scope of our current understanding of life? What's
Well,
happening out there? I just got to
yeah,
know.
to me, the interesting part of it was that it's very hard to predict because there is no plan. So what happens is things happen by happenstance, or there's a breakthrough created someplace. There's no predictive models for breakthrough, right?
Right.
It happens when it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But the I really enjoyed the historical look back, um, and how automation as a whole has, on a macroeconomic basis, created more jobs and more opportunity and more wealth and better standard of living than the previous, right? So whether it was the agricultural age moving into the industrial age, or industrial into information, or information into software, to software into AI, um, and I don't mean to be Pollyannish here, but I'm very bullish at what I think the potential for AI is to create better jobs, to create a better standard of living, to solve some really difficult problems. And yes, jobs will be lost, but history has proven that more jobs are created at each of those stages. I mean, you could have said, okay, we don't need this many people to grow food anymore, so I can just sit back and bring the money in. No, they all got different educational opportunities and moved into different jobs, and,
Right.
and that happened time and time again. So I am not so scared about being replaced. I don't think. First of all, I'm too old. By the time it happens, I don't have to worry about it. But second, I think that every time when you look historically, it has created new jobs, new opportunities, and new ways. Granted, there will be problems. Granted, there are lots of issues to get over. But I go back to a quote that John Kennedy said, that if a person is smart enough to create a machine that can eliminate a job from another person, that same person is smart enough to create another job. So and that goes back a few years, and I think it's still true.
What so besides Nvidia, like I know you're not a certified financial planner or a stockbroker, but what other companies are on the cutting edge that are just, do you think, are going to blow up? Because all I hear about is Nvidia, and that's about it.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I think that there will be others that come through there, but I really like what many of the existing companies with large customer bases and large platforms to work with are doing with AI. You look what Google announced yesterday in terms of where they're going, and they're going to be competing head to head with Adobe.
Mm,
They're working Gemini in with their cloud capacity and their file servers and their search, and they're going to be creating things that theoretically could eliminate a dam.
mm.
And so I think some of the applications of AI in for existing technology and other companies are going to be just as powerful as the new ones that are popping up. They're kind of we don't even know yet because they aren't quite on the radar, right? But Adobe has been very impressive with what they're doing with AI in terms of their workflow and things like that too. So and that also gives me reason to believe this isn't a flash in the pan, right?
Yeah.
You got a lot of people that are already making a lot of money, putting a lot of money into it, and they're making more money. So that seems like a sustainable model.
Well, I think we're always at the pitch level of, we know we want to do it, and there are a number of companies that are going to come in. Adobe, for example, will come in and
Mm-hmm.
do a training session on AI, new tools and development. And we've seen other companies go out and buy that segment, that product set,
Mm-hmm.
and then just flail. And so they've spent
Mm-hmm.
$250,000 doing this. They don't have the training. Someone once said that, all right, so for 250,000, I get the Adobe suite. Um, how much does it cost for the product version that actually works? Is that 300? Is that 400,000? What is it? And I think that may be the dam, not a digital asset management system, but sort
Mm-hmm.
of the dam that is holding everything back in terms of, can we prove this out before I make an investment? So I'm just going to ham
Mm-hmm.
hand it and use the existing public tools
Mm-hmm.
available. So
Yeah.
that's kind of
Yeah.
where we are.
You know,
What
if I were a company of your size too, I would look at the larger platform product set offerings, but I would also think about creating sort of a custom set of tools and integrating them, and think about configurable instead of programmable. So you think
hmm,
that, you take, there are 5 or 6 hot tools, and you can do some integration. You think about the flow of data between them, and then as one product, does not move along with the time, or a new one pops in that leapfrogs, you can unplug something and plug something back in, so you get a future fit system, one that you can continually upgrade to stay current with configuration instead of programming. And I think that's a kind of a plug and play kind of idea that I think is relevant for the mid scale, to the mid tier companies that you were talking about a minute ago.
well, the high bar is how do you create a dynamic flow of creative elements that feed into an optimized media system.
Mm-hmm.
So fancy term for instead of going through the brief session and then writing up some concepts and presenting to the client and then getting back to them in terms of their revisions and then putting it together. There is a moment in time right now where we actually need machines to create all of that to optimize based on how customers are receiving the messages and making that happen. I mean,
Yep.
programmatic media has done that in spades, but there are
Yep.
so many other spaces for that to play in.
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah.
have a quick question for you. So, on your bedside table or on your bedside reading tablet, what are you referencing? What are you reading right now? And what are the blogs, the websites? What keeps you plugged in besides your own push to like I gotta Google what's the latest in AI? What do you find are really credible sources to stay up on this topic right now?
Yeah. My bedside table is not reserved. I don't reserve it for keeping up with things. I read.
Use it for books you read to fall asleep.
Yeah, yeah, or ponder. I do a lot of newsletter reading. I do a lot of, I wake up every morning to Morning Brew,
Mm,
and I like that. And then I usually go on to Marketing Brew and Technology Brew, and dig a little deeper in there. I also get some, Alan Sorokin newsletter thing. I read The Economist. I try to keep up with trends in business and technology. Um, and I do it every morning. Every morning, I spend an hour and 2 cups of coffee scouring
mm.
and reading and thinking, and I'm trying to wean myself off googling things and going to AI to find those things. I don't know if you've heard of there's a new AI tool called Perplexity,
Mm.
and they say,
I'm going to act like I know what that is. Yes,
yeah,
Chris.
just look perplexed. um, they bill themselves as the first answer engine instead of a search engine.
Hmm,
Search, and by the way, search is going to have a real hard time with
I bet.
AI.
Yep,
They're already starting to see the failings of it, but because everybody's using AI to do different things, and people are tired of the ads.
totally.
People are tired of just getting a blue link instead of the answer. So
Yeah.
Perplexity dips into 7 different LLMs, and brings the answers up instantly, and also sources each of those. So
Hmm,
you get a source of each of the answers, so you can consider that when you're thinking of it. And it is that is a really good way to, when you come up with a question or something you need to know, to plug in, and it gives you really good direction then to
hmm.
get a little deeper in it. But that's been my favorite one to use. But I have not used the new ChatGPT product that they announced this week. That's the other thing. There's a new product out.
Mm.
There's something else happening every day of every week. I don't recommend putting that on your bedside table.
There's the rise of the consultants and the teachers in the class system right now for
Mm-hmm.
even just how to do prompts on ChatGPT. And it sounds like it's simple, but
Mm-hmm.
there are several people that you can buy these courses off of IG or TikTok, but they will actually help turn you into an AI engineer just to get more information off the
Yeah.
web. Because I agree with you. I think Google search and Bing search have turned into ad platforms. Nothing wrong with that. That's how I make my money.
Yeah.
But I need information now, and I don't necessarily need advertising.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come back to a topic. We were on programmatic, the need to create advertising that is optimized based on, let's say, a day part, a version, a price, a language, feeding it up. Let's talk about the store environment, for example. In the retail world, anybody that has a 500 million impressions through drive-throughs, pickups, apps that are driving people to pick up a Whopper or
Hmm.
a stack of chicken nuggets, um, they're starting to conceive of the idea that maybe our retail environment is actually a media platform, which I just started talking to our clients about it.
Hmm.
They want to figure out how to monetize it, but
Yeah.
mostly how to serve the ads into it. But I thought for the first time, somebody like Walmart was way ahead of it, Sam's was way ahead of it, Costco's way ahead of it, but they're now selling to vendors that this is probably the most efficient media play, retail media on the planet. Have you knocked into any of that in your travels?
Not yet. I do think that that's a potential for the future, and I think it's obviously the technology is getting there rapidly with the smart screens and everything else being in the retail locations, and the being able to serve content to those is, all of it is doable, and getting it to be served. And man, I think it's already being done on a day part level, but I think it's the personalization aspect that makes that really interesting, and I think that will be what turns the corner on it.
Mm.
So um, when the retail outlet recognizes, when your footprint from your phone, whether it be because you're part of their loyalty club or whatever it is, and serves it up directly to you, the individual, I think that's going to be the breakthrough.
Hmm.
And when you think about a drive-through line at a restaurant, you got time to do that. You got time to change that out, and you got, then you think about what kind of ads would you do? What are your partners? Who are your strategic alliances with,
Hmm.
from a co-branding standpoint, if you will, so that your offering as a QSR is also going to be based on other things that people from QSRs are really interested in.
Sure.
Could be SUVs, it could be whatever those things are, and who is your set of partner
The new
brands.
food interiors for Ford.
Yeah, there you go.
People are
Yeah.
living in their cars. Another question for you is so if anybody's interested in working with your company, where can we find you, Chris?
Well, first of all, on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. You can also find me at the AIQ.com. So that would be another good source. So
Cool.
but would love to hear from anybody on LinkedIn, and let's get a conversation going.
Love it. Appreciate the time that you spent with us this afternoon. Always good to talk with you. We're going to say goodbye. I wanted to thank the people from Fallback Studios, our producer, Jen Hegren, Joe Stuber, our writer. And with that, we're going to say goodbye and adios.
See you later.
On the next episode of Burning Questions, what in the heck do food and cocktail recipes have to do with marketing and advertising? We're going to find out as I sit down with businessman, podcaster, and the author of CMO Suites, plus the guy that runs the podcast, The CMO Suite.
Every social platform is like a nightclub. It always ages up. And from my perspective, maybe Twitter has not only aged up, but they've aged out of their potential usefulness.
Recipes for Marketing Success is his book. Sean Halder, we're going to talk about this, plus all the other businesses that he's involved with. Great guest. You don't want to miss it. Check it out.